Welcome back. So beginning the second half of the week, here we got Devon laying just a single ply there of fiberglass over these ribs there in the foreplane, and that's because the hangers are aluminum there, and this will prevent any sort of electrolysis from happening. And I'm working on some of the extra wiring there in the center console, just putting connectors in just to make it so it's really easy to pull the console in and out without worrying about the sort of wiring that's sort of stuck in there. So I basically put connectors on everything that runs through there, and I've got a few more little things to do there. Still got to hook up the pressurization dump switch there, but for the most part everything else is sorted out. And last time somebody had commented that I really shouldn't be running the Arduino on 12 volts, so just take their word for it. I've decided to put in another one of these USB outlets there and just power it directly off of that. So Devon made that bracket for me, and I just got it mounted in place now. And so this is what it looks like mounted. And as you can see, you just got a little short USB cable plugged in there, and I'll probably end up putting a cable tie around that so it can't fall out. And as you can see, it's powered up there and just operating the same way as it was on the 12 volts, and this way it'll draw less power and use less or generate less heat. And over in the engine compartment, so Devon's been working on creating this little bracket, and that's going to hold this linear actuator that we have that is going to open and close the vent there for the cowling that allows extra hot air to escape from the engine compartment. So that bracket is just going to have that mounted. So this is what it looks like, just mocked into place. There's the actuator, the linear actuator there. And if you look from kind of underneath here, you can see the end of it there. And so the next step now is to create a bracket there that hooks to the door itself to open and close the door like that. So with the cowling removed from the engine, you can see Devon has basically reinforced the two hinges across there with some existing carbon fiber that we had there, a couple of bits there to sort of act like a torque tube. And he's also created the little bracket there, that one there, and that's just going to get a hole drilled in at the appropriate position, and then the whole thing will rotate there around the hinges using the actuator. And that's what it's going to look like there. So the actuator will just be mounted there, just be bolted in single shear. That carbon little bracket there was existing 90 degree that we had, and it's super strong, way more than we need for this. So just a single bolt going through there should do the trick. And back in the cabin, I've spent a couple of half days already trying to get this pressurization controller to work correctly. It's basically working, and you can hear the pump running, but unfortunately it's not generating any pressure. So I've even tried this with a balloon on there just to see if it's actually putting out enough air. And ultimately what the air does, it inflates these bladders here. So in the back where the valves are here, these two orange things, those are seals, and they're basically inflated, and they push and close those openings. And by varying that, they can allow or adjust how much air comes out of the cabin. Anyway, so that pump sounds like it's working, but there's some solenoids in there that throw the valves, and the solenoids aren't clicking open correctly. And so there's the wiring diagram. So and you can see there's the connector in there. So I've done all the wiring, and I think everything's done correctly. And we've been troubleshooting it. Dylan's been helping me out there from Enviro, and the next goal now, or the next thing to do now, is to hook it up to this serial connection and actually get some real debugging information off it to see why it's not working as it's supposed to. And meanwhile, Devon's working on another bracket now. He's becoming the king of all brackets. So this one is just a quick one that's going to help support the coolant reservoir on the engine, because that doesn't have one yet, and you'll see more on that one next time. So these pieces that were bonded into place on that cowling door are now set up. So what's going to happen there is Devon's going to lay a little bit of micro over there that can be sort of formed and shaped to be a bit more aerodynamic going out of there. So I can only spend so much time on one task that's not really going anywhere until I have to get on and be productive doing something else. So I decided to move on to doing this little job that's been on my list for a little while, and that was connecting across the fuel flow sensors. And we have one that flows or measures the flow of fuel into the engine, and then one that measures the return. And if you've been following along forever, you'll remember when I hooked those up to the engine when it was on the stand, and it was reading the information through the ECU. So what it does, it just gets a voltage there from each of the sensors. Actually, it reads kind of like a heartbeat off there, how many times it sort of triggers per second, and it uses that to determine the flow. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to, because that information is still going to the ECU, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to have it display on the Garmin G3X as well, because that can handle and read those same sensors. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm splicing in here a connection between the one that already exists to the ECU and the GEA24, which is the Garmin engine analyzer unit. So there's two different lines there, one for each sensor, and I don't have to worry about sending power to those sensors because they already have power and ground. So what I've done is just basically connected the sensor wire for each one across from the ECU over to the GEA24, and just put it in the right little pinouts, which you'll see coming up here. And my hope is that when I start the engine the next time, that I get the same reading there on the Garmin as what I do on the Motec output. And the advantage of having it on the Garmin will be that it'll also work with the range planning on the G3X, and I guess I think it probably transfers over to the 750, although I noticed when I've been powering up, I guess the world tipped over and I managed to put it back up again. Anyway, I noticed, sorry, even though I wasn't ready for that, I noticed that when I power up the 750, that it asks you how much fuel you have on board when it goes through the first boot screen, and it also asks you your average fuel flow. So I'm kind of interested to see if the two interface together, and the 750 talks to the G3X to pick up the information, because the GEA24 is talking to the G3X, and it's telling you, or telling the G3X exactly how much fuel is being burnt because of these sensors. And if you set your fuel level when you start out your flight, and it knows exactly how much fuel is being burnt at any given time, or being used at any given time, then it's going to know exactly what fuel is remaining, just like a normal totalizer. So it's kind of odd that the 750 would ask for your average fuel burn there, unless it uses it for some kind of generic flight planning or something like that. I'm not sure yet. Anyway, so what I'm doing there is basically just splicing in the first one, and I just sort of split the line there that was going into one of the connectors for the ECU there. It's just the easiest way to do it. At this point, there's still a bunch of little projects to be done, and I'm just trying to get everything done as quick as I can, and this was one of the things that's on the list. So it's not always going to be the prettiest solution, but again, this is a prototype. I'm just trying to get everything working, and so splicing this in was the best way to do it. And then on the other end, just putting some of the regular crimp-on connectors on there, and initially I just wanted to get the first one working, and unfortunately there's no way to really test this that I know of other than to actually run some fuel through there. I could probably turn the fuel pump on and see if it blips. Actually, that's probably a good idea. I'll try that on Monday. Although there's virtually no fuel in the tanks at this point. I drained it out a little while ago. But we're not that far away from putting fuel back on board and filling up the oil again after I drained that, and topping up the coolant. And then what I'm going to have to do the next time I run the engine, I'm going to have to put the prop on, because I don't want to risk not having oil running to those the oil rings there that work for the governor to supply oil into the prop. So if I didn't put the prop on, oil would come squirting out the back, and if I block off the oil feed, then those rings wouldn't get any oil and they get hot really quickly and they may get damaged. So the only really way to do it is somehow block off the prop there where the oil comes through, and the best way to do that block off the prop shaft. The best way to do that is to just put the prop on. So what we're going to do when I'm ready here, and probably be, or could be as early as next week, is put the old prop on, back it up to the door there that you see in the background, and anchor the whole thing, and just basically fire it up with the prop pointing out the door like I've had it before on the engine stand. And we won't even be running it up to high power. I'm just going to start it and let it idle, and then I can check and just make sure that we're getting oil pressure running to the drive and everything else is working, and at the same time I can check and see these things, the fuel flow and that sort of stuff, to see that that's all working. And ultimately, if everything looks good on the engine and all the different things are done, then the next step after that would be to actually pull the engine off again in preparation for getting this thing out of the building. And I know a lot of people have asked, so I'll give you the scoop on what's going to happen, and because not everybody will see this episode. So anyway, this is what's going to happen. So we're going to pull the engine off there, and what the cowling that you still see there, that's already obviously bonded on, that will remain. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a forklift, and we're going to lift up the fuselage from the 4-plane bolts from the nose basically, and then we're going to slide it out the big door sideways, and it'll fit. We've already done all the measurements that way, and then once it's out the door, we'll just lower it down again on the nose, and it'll be basically sitting back on the gear. At that point we can tow it up to the airport, and we'll take the engine up separately, and then we can rehang the engine up there and get everything all hooked back up again and filled with fluids and all that sort of stuff, and then transport the wings up to the airport and get those bolted on, and then just go through all the niggling little things of getting it all ready to go. But we're probably still several weeks away from being able to do that, because apart from all the little jobs and stuff that I have to do, we have to finish off stuff on the cowling, and the wings need to be finished off, the closeout on the winglets, and unfortunately we ran out of high sol hardener. Jeff ended up using more hardener than what he thought was going to use when he closed out the wing. So he'd had some on order, but they take like a week and a half to get it delivered for some reason. I'm not sure. Come on, Composites One, get your act together. We get stuff overnight from Spruce. Anyway, so we're waiting until I think it's next Thursday before they're getting the high sol in, and then they can ship it to us. So that's unfortunate, but there's plenty of other things to do along the way. Anyway, so once the aircraft is up at the airport, we'll be able to finish off just tidying everything else up, and then we can start getting ready for taxi testing, and then ultimately first flight once the taxi testing is done. And that's all. This is probably going to end up happening in April, or maybe even into early May. So exciting, but there's still a lot of stuff to do. So here I'm just basically putting that connector back into the GEA24, plugging that back into the unit there, and it's a little bit difficult to see because I can't see the front or the back face of it there. So I've got to flip around and try and get it oriented. There's like 4 different connectors in the back there, and just trying to get it sorted out is a bit difficult. So anyway, what other projects do I still have to do that you guys don't know about? I still have to install a parking brake knob, which is going to go on the sort of center console and just be hooked up to that little hydraulic parking brake actuator that goes with the Behringer stuff. And there's a bunch of other little projects to do with the gear doors, and what else? I don't know, a couple other different things. I've got a list of stuff, but it's getting shorter by the day, which is good. So there I'm plugging the connector back in, and that's one of the sensors, and there's the other sensor. So they're sort of both wired together a little bit. And then running back around to the front to the cabin, I'll power up the unit there, and you hold the menu button as you turn the power on, as you'll see here. And then that puts the G3X into the configuration mode. Sort of boots it in so you can change all the parameters. Yeah, it takes a little bit for that to come up. But once it does, you have all these different options and things like that that you can go in and configure for not just this G3X, but the engine analyzer unit and all the different RS-232 connections and things like that, even the ADARs and the magnetometer and all that sort of stuff. So there you can see all the different panels there. So I'm clicking on the engine one, and then I can go down to the fuel flow. And I'd already sort of configured this before, so this is just checking to make sure I had the right parameters in there. So this is the fuel flow in, and you just choose the type of sensor that you have there, which I already have selected up the top there, and there's really not too much else to change. You can put some color bars in there on the thing if you want, but that's not really necessary at this point. So it all looks like it's configured correctly, and then once you're happy with that, you can just sort of back out of there and hit save. And there I'm actually putting in something, I don't know. Oh yeah, the total number of gallons on the ship, 124. So yeah, then you back out of there and you save all that, and then see what it says on the display. So you can see on the top left there, the second little bar down, I don't know if you can see that, but that's already showing there the fuel flow. And once it reboots, you'll see the same thing. And obviously right now, because the engine's not running, it's just showing 0. And so after I did all that, the next thing to do was just basically run the other wire, hook that up to a different pin out, and that gives the return fuel flow, and it basically just subtracts that from the fuel flow going in and gives you the net value, same as what the ECU, the Motec ECU does. So hopefully there's no conflict between having both devices read the same sensor. We didn't have any problems when we were doing the same thing on the pressure sensors between the Arduino and the ECU, so hopefully Garmin and the ECU play together nicely. So anyway, that looks good. And Jeff has been working on this first elevator now, getting the ribs bonded into place. So what he's done now is mounted the hangers there for the elevator, and then hooked up the actual hinges themselves to the ribs and aligned everything, and now he's got the ribs bonded into place with some high sol. So with everything sort of aligned there nicely now, that hinge will rotate nicely and the elevator will rotate nicely without any sort of binding going on. And then you can see the high sol there between that rib and the upper skin. So Monday he should get the other one of those done. I think he has enough high sol just to do that. And here's that cowling, and Devon's laid up a little bit of micro over there, so that can just be hand shaped now, just to create a bit more of a smooth outflow there. And back in the cabin, the last thing I did this evening, Friday, was put this little connector on there in preparation for being able to hook up the laptop there and read the serial port of the pressurization controller, and hopefully diagnose that and find out why it's not closing the solenoids. So that'll be Monday. Anyway, that's our update for this week, and things are starting to get pretty exciting here going forward. Tune in again on Tuesday and see what we get up to, and thanks again for watching.